Okay, we'll kick off the final two sessions for the afternoon. You're all doing really, really well, so I don't think we've lost too many people. So that's a good start, Melanie. So I want to introduce Melanie Fetter. A lot of people will know Melanie and will have worked with her over the years. And so I'll give a very brief bio because, you know, you deserve one. So Melanie is a qualified librarian. She's been working for Ex Libris for 18 years, initially based in the UK as part of the European Professional Services team. So Melanie was responsible for the implementation, training and configuration of ALIF, and after her involvement in the early ALMA QA testing and the implementation of the first UK ALMA at UEL in 2012, she relocated to the Adelaide office. She now leads the team implementing ALMA, Primo VE and Leganto across the APAC region. So Melanie has got some topics that she's going to talk to. We did send her some topics because normally we have a Q&A session with Ex Libris staff and the things are a little bit different this year because the timing of our conference. So Melanie has kindly agreed to come and talk to us about some of the topics we sent, but I believe she's got a few up her sleeve of her own. So we may run a little bit over time with Melanie because I'm prepared to give up some of my vital ANZREG business time so that Melanie can have a bit more time. So we'll just see how we go and how many questions you have.
Okay. Welcome everyone. It's nice to see you all. It's nice to be here. It's been quite a long time since I was last in the Gold Coast, but I did manage to have a nice walk on the beach last night and take a nice pickie. So yes, as Kate mentioned, there's a few topics that you kind of asked us to say a few words about. So I have got a few slides that go through each of these areas with a little bit more information about what's happening, timelines and so on. I did add a few other things in as well, but hopefully we'll have some time also for any questions that you have about these and other things if you wish to. So first of all, just a few words about what's happening with the UI. Obviously we had the big change to the UI a little while back, but we continue to work with the working group on various different areas for improvements of not only the interface, but also some of the workflow pain points. So we, along with the working group, kind of highlighted some of the key areas that were classed as workflow pain points and looked at where and how we can make improvements to those areas. So obviously, as part of that, some of the things are related to helping not only with the interface itself, but navigation around the interface, tools for helping make workflows more efficient, things like the feedback messages, which are already released. You've seen when you do things, you get this little message that kind of flies across the right-hand side of the screen for you, red or green, depending on whatever it is. We're also working on improvements in menus, in multi-facet selections, so being able to more easily choose multiple facets within each facet group. So not only, you know, a facet from each group, but multiple facets within the groups. Looking at where we can improve configuration, the interface for the mapping and the code tables, and also our activity center. So the Activity Centre, I'm just looking at my notes because I've got lots of timelines here. I think the Activity Centre, if I remember, is coming later this year. Is really looking at being able to easily navigate to or easily see your recent activities. We find it quite a lot. I mean, I know myself when I'm working within the system, you go ahead and create an order. You get your nice little message that tells you, okay, PO whatever's been created. And if you don't copy that PO number or take any note of that PO number, then it's not so easy to find it again. So So, you know, things like that, being able to come to my recent activity list, being able to see the things I've been working on and easily navigate back to certain areas of the system. We're also continuing to prove around accessibility. So we have obviously our existing WCAG conformance report, but we're working now on the 2.1 and obviously into next year with the new metadata editor, with the colour scheme, and 2.1 without exception coming towards the end of next year. The metadata editor then. So of course a lot of work has been going into improving this. The metadata editor has been a source of complaint since I can remember. So obviously improving the working within this area. Part of that is going to be improving navigation around the screen, the accessibility of the tools within the screen, being able to more easily work between the different areas. Dynamic navigation, for example, dynamic menus, and being able to add records to an editing queue from the search as well, I think will be a big advantage. Now, some of these features will start to trickle through from the end of the year on into the first half of next year. So you'll start to see different features appearing over coming months. The rollout, as I've mentioned, so the rollout will be that we're already working with an early adopter group in a demo environment, and then moving into testing with real data in a sandbox and a production environment. Then it's going to be rolled to the wider audience with some limited functionality. So this is where, as I say, the functionality will come then moving further into 2020. The old is out, probably going to be no earlier than mid-2020. I think we're going to be looking at second half of 2020 before everybody will be kind of pushed into the new interface. Okay. The known issues operator. So the known issues list, some of you may have seen this already. There is a new role, which is the known issues operator role, that gives you access to the known issues list from the Alma Help menu. So once the user has this role, they can then see a list of a known issues list that we're creating based on high priority cases which have been identified as bugs and have a fixed date associated with them. It looks a little bit like this. There is a search up there at the top, so you can search by case number, by description, by summary as well of the case to help find. So if you've discovered a new problem, you can always take a look at the known issues list, see if it's already been reported and a fix has already been committed, and then obviously from there you can either create the case and refer to it, or just know that it's coming and no need to create the case. So this will include all of the major fixes in the previous 3 releases as well as the coming releases. And obviously it will get updated. Sorry, if I go just back one slide, you can see that some of them actually have quarters, generally not halves, usually quarters. But obviously, as you get closer to the date when the actual monthly release has been confirmed, then that will change from a quarter to an actual month there. I've put the links in the slides. Obviously, the slides will be shared, so you will be able to get to more information about all these things where relevant. CDI. So this one's a big one for all of us, I think. So we're looking from different points of view, but certainly with the steep increase that we have in the available materials, the different types of materials, the diverse material types, a change in user expectations, and this all around the single search box that we have in Primo. So this is obviously a big challenge. We also, and we'll talk a little more in a second about Primo and Summon, but of course we're also working on the two indexes that we have currently, the Summon index and the Primo index, and looking at bringing it all together to provide a much better service for you. Obviously, some of the key things that we were looking at, and one of the things that certainly I personally think is a huge win, is the update cycle. So looking at, much quicker updates, much faster ingest of materials, that it's much more scalable. We'll talk in a second a little bit more about the infrastructure, but that we have a real improvement and update on the infrastructure that we're sitting on. The relationship database, and again I'll say a few more words about the different types of relationships, but that we can really use this to build more on the relationships between the different materials that we have, the different articles and resources available. I'm just going to skip over this because actually it's a bit of a repeat. So let's jump into the benefits then. We've got, as we mentioned, the latest hardware architecture, the fast and more efficient cycle. So you can see, those of you who are working now with PCI, for example, with Alma, know that when we activate something in Alma, then we go to PCI and we activate it in the PCI interface, we're then waiting anywhere up to like a week and a half before we're seeing those articles appearing as they should on the Primo side. So this is one of the key things that we really wanted to do something about, being able to reduce that cycle up to a maximum of 48 hours there for those updates. On the Summon side, it was really about upgrading the infrastructure, about enhancing the searching capabilities. On the Primo side, we also wanted to improve the workflow process between the activations between Alma and Primo, pull that together to a more simple activation mechanism. And one of the other things we're looking at, and I do have a slide about this, so I'll show you it in just a second, but looking at the way that records are displayed in Primo as well. So at the moment we're seeing grouped records in Primo and moving that to a merged record view. Okay, and just a note there about the permalinks, because I know that it's something that often people are asking about. So as part of the migration, we will be handling the permalinks. We estimate about 92% will work. So there may be one or two that slip through there, but most of your permalinks should continue to work after the move. So we talked about relationships and the different kinds of relationships we're looking at on the CDI side. And there are some quite obvious ones, proper formal relationships, books and their book chapters, maybe the book reviews for those articles along with the research data, but also looking at other areas that we could build relationships and leveraging off things like the BX recommender. So being able to look at the co-usage that we get from the recommender information. And of course then curated relationships as well. Other items that are on this particular course, other articles that are cited by this particular material. I mentioned about the display of the records, and I'm sure those of you with Primo and Primo VE will be very familiar with this grouped records, multiple sources exist, see all, and being able to look and see, all the different versions of exactly the same thing. So we've been working also on improving this view and using this merged record display rather than the groupings. So it's going to be using a matching and merging methodology, matching based on identifiers such as the DOI, the PMID, also taking into account ISBN, ISSN, and so on, looking at start and end pages for articles, and obviously the metadata itself. And where we have those matches, then actually creating a merged view of the record. So taking all of those sources and pulling them into one view. So it's not going to be like the Primo preferred record, it's actually going to be a merged view of the sources of information. What it's going to look like on the ALMA side, so you'll notice that there'll be a new CDI tab that will appear in your electronic resources in ALMA, where you can then define, obviously, whether this is searchable, not searchable in CDI, and the various information there about the CDI activation. Also being able to search these, sorry, I thought I'd got another slide there, being able to see these in your search results and also on the analytics side. So these fields will also be available within analytics for being able to produce reports and find this information. So there will also be new additions to the advanced search under the electronic titles, electronic collections, electronic portfolio searches. You'll also have these fields as search options there too. As far as the timeline for the rollout, so you can see actually the green lines kind of maybe a little bit more this way right now, but you can see kind of where we are at the moment. So we're in that phase 1 where we're starting with the early access. Now, from implementation point of view, what it means is that all the implementations that we're starting now, we're actually starting with CDI. We're not going anywhere near PCI for our new implementations. So that's most of the early access is falling into that new implementations category. There's absolutely no point starting implementing PCI when we're this close to moving to CDI. Phase 2 then will be looking at Primo and SFX, so customers that aren't necessarily using ALMA, and moving those customers that are ALMA and Primo VE. Phase 3 will be pushing for the rest of the ALMA Primo VE customers to move across. And then you see with phase 4 and phase 5, eventually by the end of 2020, we should have all customers moved from PCI to CDI. For most of you, I think you're going to be kind of falling into by August-ish. So obviously we'll be talking to you about the move, about the migration process. Your PCI activations will be migrated into CDI, and then whether you're looking at the easy access or the fully flexible model. Right. Have we got any consortia? No, I don't think we've got any consortia in the room. Okay, counter 5. So we started to work with early testing partners as far as the rollout of Counter 5 goes. We're expecting that all of that will be finished by the end of the year, and that this will then be fully launched to the entire community in January. Both Counter 4 and Counter 5, so Counter 4 will still be available, of course. They'll be running in parallel. And sorry, I thought I got a screenshot next, but it's the next slide. So you'll be running with both 4 and 5 until Counter 4 is phased out eventually, and who knows when that will be. So, a lot of vendors will continue to work with Counter 4 for a good while yet, I should imagine. But obviously, as vendors are starting to work with Counter 5 or already are working with Counter 5, then you'll be able to transition those across. I do have it in the coming screenshots, but just a note here about the report types. So those of you who are loading your Counter 4 now will know that for each sushi account, it's specific to report type. With Counter 5, of course, one account can cover all of your multiple report types. So this is how it's going to look within your vendor record, within the usage data tab. You can choose to add your sushi account and then choose whether it's 5 or 4 that you're adding. And once it's added, you can see here then that we're covering all of the report types in one sushi account, and the Harvest Now will actually update the usage for all of those report types. Just to say thank you to those of you who are involved. So obviously I mentioned that we're working now with the early testers. A few of you in the room are part of that group, along with some others from the US. Okay. The provider zone. So most of you probably have heard about the provider zone by now. What we've been working on, and some of you will know, obviously you probably yourselves have this as a pain point, that the loading of the community zone, providers, vendors are giving us the data. We're then doing validations, enrichments, normalizations, and loading the data. And of course, that sort of coming through us causes, I don't want to use the word bottleneck, it's not a nice word, but you know, it's coming through us as a middleman to do something with it before it actually gets into the community zone. Now, of course, as the types of material, the numbers of providers, the numbers of materials are increasing, this is becoming, obviously, a big overhead. And it really is a challenge. So, you know, we're going through obtaining the title list, analysing them, loading the content, updating them, where there are issues, having to go back to the provider, and kind of going round and round in this circle. And what we wanted to look at is ways that we could improve the process, both for us and for you. Because, of course, this also means that sometimes you're having to wait for new content to become available for you in the community zone. So we've worked on the provider zone. The provider zone is based on our APIs. So it's the vendors actually making use of the APIs and being able to load their metadata straight into the community zone. So they're creating the collections, the portfolios, and their bibliographic records, the mark data that you find in there, directly from their own data loading through the APIs. So they will take ownership of these. Obviously, there's an agreement that we make with them, which involves a certain level of quality for the data that's going to go in there, but it takes away that kind of the maintenance and the ownership that we have right now with dealing with the content, and puts it back in the hands of the vendors and providers. As far as you're concerned, this transition for any of this data that's being loaded directly from the providers is completely seamless. You won't notice, you won't see any impact or any issues from the providers taking over the ownership of that, or the maintenance of that data. Of course, it's still their data, they own it, but the maintenance of loading it. So there's nothing for you to do. You don't have to worry about activations. You don't have to worry about changes to IDs or linking information. It really is just that they will start to load the data directly in rather than sending it to us and through us. Okay. And what you'll see then is something that looks like this. So when we're looking at a collection level, you'll actually see that that particular collection is being managed directly from by the provider and who that provider is. Similarly, at the portfolio level, for each portfolio, you'll also see the provider that's managing that data. As far as the timeline goes, so development is all obviously completed back in middle of the year, and we started working with development partners on testing of the environments. This testing should be completed by the end of the year, and the 5 partners that we're working with at the moment that have been our development partners, those 5 providers will be in the production community zone at the beginning of next year. For those of you who are interested, the providers that we're working with are ProQuest, IEEE, Sage, Alexander Street Press, and I'm referring back to my notes because I did write it down, Taylor and Francis. All right, the next gen resource sharing. So this is a big one, and they're all quite big ones, but this is a really big one. So a lot of you already are working with Alma for your resource sharing, either through peer-to-peer or perhaps with a broker system. And you are probably aware that recently we acquired Rapid ILL, which is fantastic. It's such a fabulous service, and we want to kind of build on that and grow that. So we're looking at, or we started already to work on a new next generation resource sharing that will be built on top of the Alma platform. Obviously, again, looking at the user experience primarily, so we want to make sure that this is going to be a nice experience for our users, that it will be fast, accurate, transparent, that it makes your workflows more efficient and more advanced than we have right now with the Alma resource sharing, and also working on a shared holdings index. So what you'll see, and of course these are just mock-up screens at the moment, but on the Primo side, finding a particular resource, the options, the various options for how to get that resource, displayed in a very clear way with expected delivery right from the beginning. Being able to see if there are things that are actually held in libraries close to where we are, where those libraries are on the map, so the ability actually also to go get it. And once a request has been submitted, to actually have very good and very clear tracking of the status of the request and the due time for delivery. So we are working with development partners, as always, for this. And again, some of you in the room we'd very much like to thank. So you can see Macquarie Uni of Adelaide, Monash and CSI Rowe, amongst some others in the US, are working with us on this. And the timeline plan is that we're actually just past the kickoff of the development group. We expect to start working with early adopters February 2020. The general release then will actually be at the end of 2020. And then eventually non-ALMA institutions being able to make use of it in December 2021. So for the first 12 months it will be ALMA institutions working obviously as a network there, and then moving to non-ALMA institutions at the end of 2021. So they were the topics on the list, and that actually took me nicely to the 30 minutes. So this is where I'm going to be greedy and steal a few more minutes. I also wanted to just say a couple of words about Dara. So I think that a lot of you will have seen Dara and her recommendations popping up for you in ALMA, and obviously we're continuing to grow the areas that Dara can help us with. So we're going to start seeing things like high demand in items, recommendations for additional purchase perhaps, cataloguing related recommendations, duplicate recognitions? Do you realise you've got 3 versions of this, what we think is the same thing? Would you like to review those and deal with them? And obviously around the e-resources, so growing the different recommendations that we already have started around our e-resources. Our next-gen analytics. I don't know how many of you have seen this yet, or seen demos, or seen our YouTube videos about it, but this is very exciting. So the move towards the data visualization in analytics. So in March, I believe, in the March release, you will see the rollout of the OBI 12. I think it's OBI 12. And obviously have access then to the new analytics, which is very exciting. It looks really cool. And lastly, I wanted to just say, again, thank you for all your involvement as a community, and just kind of highlight as well the success, I believe, the success of the Ideas Exchange. So I'm sure, hopefully, all of you have been into the Ideas Exchange, have shared your ideas, had voted or commented on other people's ideas. And we really see a lot of new roadmap features, a lot of new functions actually coming from not only the NARES voting system, but also from the Ideas Exchange. So please continue. It's, I think, a really great tool for sharing, you know, your wants and your needs with product management and with us to be able to kind of move those forward. Even things that you don't see yet on Ideas Exchange as planned, because they don't have a fixed date, very often we've already got them kind of penciled in, or got development issues created for them. You know, we're looking into possibilities. So yeah, please do continue with the Ideas Exchange. And not only the ALMA Ideas Exchange, but we also have the ProQuest Ideas Exchange, where you can submit your ideas for Oasis and for ebooks too. So yes, thank you. And hopefully then that gives me some time as well for any questions that you have.
G'day, Chris from USQ. With regards to moving the partnership zone, so when the vendor's updating the information in there, when we're logging support tickets to get that stuff updated, do we still will then log it through Ex Libris or straight to the vendor managing those?
You can still put your cases into us, and we can facilitate, obviously, the talking with the provider. I don't believe that there will be any, like now you've got that Centre Ex Libris option, so I don't believe there'll be a centre provider. I think it will still come in to, you know, Centre Ex Libris, and then we'll facilitate the discussion with the provider where things need correction or update.
Cool, thanks.
With the known issues operator, I actually submitted a case just the other day because I've been really wanting to make good use of that. But as an example, so Q4 2019, there's 160 entries and there's no date added. So how are we meant to know when something new comes? And also it appears to have no correlation to the actual resolved issues list. And for example, we're already in the November release in Sandbox, and yet the latest is still October 2019 and there's no November 2019. So I'm struggling to see the value of it, basically.
Okay. I actually did see your case.
Oh, awesome.
And I meant to say, and forgot to say, that it is still a work in progress. I mean, all of these things, I should have said it. I actually thought I'd say it multiple times as we were going along. But, you know, with all of these things, a lot of them are kind of either trickle release or improvements will come. So certainly we do have improvements still to the known issues coming. And I'm sure your case also will push a few or add a few to that list. But yeah, I mean, as with all of these things, you know, they're always works in progress. There's always kind of new features and improvements that come as, you know, with further releases. But yeah, definitely it's in its early stages right now, and we can expect to see more improvements there.
I got a few. With the CDI, I've been sending
Yes.
lots of questions into Christine,
Right.
but one has occurred to me
Okay.
while you were talking. The 92% permalinks.
Yes.
I would think surely that would be, the failures would be based on specific collections, wouldn't they, rather than piecemeal here and there? So, and could we know those collections then, so that we could fix them?
I will check and see what we can do as far as kind of sharing the potentially problematic ones. I'm not sure actually, and it's something that we can check, and I'm kind of looking to Amanda because I think she's scribbling notes there behind you. That we'll check us. I know as far as kind of the migration part goes, that there will be reports that we'll be providing to you. So whether that's something that will be part of those reports that will be shared about, you know, okay, these links are all good, but these ones are ones to pay attention to as part of that. Yeah, so we'll let you know. We'll get back to you about that. But yeah, I'm sure it's something that we can share.
Hi Melanie, with the CDI migration,
Yes.
did the testing show any impact on eShelf records that were PCI records? Like, can we expect any adverse behaviour in the favourites?
I'm not sure, actually. That's something for us to check and to let you know about. Yeah, I don't know.
Question from me. This is Peter over here
Hi.
from Bond University. So I've just noticed, going back to the ideas exchange,
Yes.
that there's a few ideas on there that seem to have been there a while that don't always get updated with a status, or votes don't get released back, or just there's no update at all, even if maybe it's not going to ever happen.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering, what is the best method for reporting or kind of triggering some sort of update? I've also seen one where I actually commented and said, this is already delivered, and there's nothing on there.
And
So
it
I
hasn't
think
been updated.
sites might get the idea that, well, it's kind of not effective if we're not going to get our votes back when something is delivered, or how can we get those sort of things to be updated?
Yeah, it's certainly something to flag with us if you spot it. So if there is, particular ones that you've seen where you have noted that they're delivered, then let any one of us know. Certainly I'm happy for you to, drop me an email or something, and I can follow it up with product management. There are things that are on there that I mentioned, behind the scenes, we actually have them kind of penciled. We don't necessarily have specific timelines, which is why they then don't necessarily change to being planned, or they may say planned, but they've been planned for 12 months or more because they're on a slightly longer term roadmap. So sometimes it can just be us, checking and, having a look for you to see where it's at in our process, if it's on a long-term roadmap. But definitely if it's one where you've noticed that it hasn't been updated and should have been, to let us know. Product management are obviously going through and reviewing them, so they try to keep them updated, but it may be just one that they've missed. So happy for you to let us know if you see them. All right. Well, thank you all very much for your time. Enjoy the rest of the day. There's a back to that stage.
Look, Melanie, I just want to thank you for taking that on today. I mean,
My pleasure.
it's really important to have that opportunity to engage with Ex Libris staff and also to the remaining Ex Libris staff at the back of the room, Amanda and Sarah, and I see Gary's arrived from ProQuest as well. So we really appreciate having you here today and the opportunity to ask questions, and that's just a very small
My
token.
pleasure. Thank you so much.
And I know Amanda and Melanie are not here tomorrow, but
Right.
Sarah is able to stay on, and of course Gary will be here, and we have the other two staff who haven't turned up yet, but they might be.
Yes,
yeah.
I actually saw them come in and then go
Oh.
out again.
Oh right, okay.
But that's okay.
Yeah.
And sorry, I should have said as well, I mean, my email is there in the slides. Most of you do know me. If there's anything that I can help with, always feel free to contact.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Okay, we're nearly there, folks. I feel like I'm about to